Hello and welcome to Beyond Partisanship. This is Peter VanValkenburgh, and I have just gotten over a bad case of the flu that lasted over 10 days, and so I apologize for not being here earlier. This channel was created to discuss politics and current events and social issues and anything and everything under the sun from a nonpartisan perspective. That doesn't mean that that I won't express opinions that will line up with one party or the other at times, but I hope to present nuanced opinions, and at times I will state opinions that go against both parties. I think it's very important that our country unite and stop this stupid culture war that's actually destroying us all, while China and Russia look on and take advantage. Today's topic is the Ukraine War, and today I want to discuss the causes of the war and the reaction to the war from the mainstream media, Republicans and Democrats, and I particularly want to focus on the positions put forward by folks like Crystal and Sager over at Breaking Points, and The Hill with their program The Rising with Robbie Sove, if I pronounce his name right, Brianna Joy Gray, and Batya Ungar Sargon, and take on the positions of Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard, and others. All people who I basically respect, some more than others. Tucker Carlson, not as much. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important that he have a voice. I think he serves a purpose in that he takes on the establishment frequently, which is good. What I object to with Tucker Carlson is that he seems to enjoy the culture war, and he likes to inflame the culture war. Now, he may deny that, and maybe he sincerely thinks he doesn't do that, but I think you can tell by the way he laughs when he's talking about some of this stuff, and you can also tell because he makes a lot of statements that despite doing a decent job of taking both parties to task at times and raising issues to the national consciousness, which I think is important. He sometimes makes absurd claims like that January 6th was peaceful, ha 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 ha, and then sometimes he laughs about it, that kind of stuff. And even though he knows it wasn't, and he states that it wasn't, but it's not that he's lying about it, but he is at least minimizing it at times. Well, anyway, I don't want to get into him in detail. I mainly want to address the point that I do listen to people. I constantly watch Rising. I constantly watch Crystal and Sager. I'm very disgusted with the mainstream media, like a lot of people. I like Joe Rogan. I listen to him, and so forth. But I want to address some of the issues about Ukraine that they have been critical of and some of the claims they've made. And I think it's important to have dissent on issues even like this, like Ukraine. I think it's important to hear the arguments of the other side, like Mershimer, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, John Mershimer, the professor at, I think it's Chicago, who makes a case for realpolitik against NATO's, what he claims is NATO's provocation of Russia. But I think it's really clear if you examine all of the evidence, and if I don't put that in the description, some of the sources where you can get a really rounded perspective on the Ukraine war. If I don't do it today or tomorrow, I'll do it soon. I'll try to get them in there as soon as possible, but because I think it's really important to hear different voices about the Ukraine war. And I'll state right out that I support the U.S. backing of Ukraine in this war. I think it's very important. I think that we shouldn't think of it so much as it's not just that we're supporting Ukraine. This is a very important move against Russia and China, and against future war, which we want to avoid with China. I think that the odds of China invading Taiwan, while they're still very real, I think those odds have gone way down as a result of the Ukraine war. And the reason for that is that Putin and Xi Jinping did not expect the kind of reaction that came about to Russia's invasion. He did not expect NATO unity, did not expect that Finland and Sweden would want to join NATO, who would apply for NATO. They've been independent countries for ever since. They've never been members of NATO. And so Putin has kind of gotten the opposite of what he expected from this war. And the unity of allies and the determination and the expense to which the West is willing to go to oppose Russia is impressive. Another reason that I think we need to oppose Russia is that Russia is setting a precedent that's very dangerous in the post-Cold War world, and that is that a nation can invade another nation with impunity. Russia has violated all of the major tenets of the UN, not to attack a neighbor, not to occupy a neighbor, and not to try to annex that property. Now, some of you will argue that the United States did that in Iraq, and I agree that we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. But in Iraq, we responded to a series of hostile military actions from Iraq when they invaded Kuwait, and then later we responded to the belligerence of Saddam Hussein, which again I don't think was a proper move. I think Bush made a huge mistake, but we'll say that for another day. But the main point I want to make about that is the United States never at any time had any intention of occupying permanently and or annexing the Iraq War. So you cannot make a sensible. You cannot equate what Putin did to what the United States has done. You just can't do it. I mean, it's a false argument. So it's real important that a message is sent to the rest of the world that this is intolerable. And arguably, this should have been done when Obama was president and Russia invaded the Crimea, which some will try to argue that it wasn't an invasion, but it was. It was a deceptive invasion by putting men in there under, little green men, without and denying that they were actually Russian troops, or at least obfuscating that fact. So it may be that our weakness before, at those points, encouraged the current invasion of Ukraine. I think another factor that's really important to mention, and this will show you that I'm not partisan, another factor that I think emboldened Putin was the way that Biden had responded to Russia previously, and I think the pullout in Afghanistan. Now, I will say that we should have never been in Afghanistan, but the way we left was reprehensible, as immoral as it was to go into Iraq, arguably. There were so many problems with the withdrawal. Now, people will argue that there was no way to leave Afghanistan without some kind of chaotic and massive situation that could have entailed the kind of losses that we entailed when we did leave Afghanistan, not only to our own soldiers who were killed at the airport, but also to those we left behind that were our allies. That's just unexcusable, immoral as could be, insensitive, and it was wrong. While I agree we never should have been in Afghanistan, I think the argument, it's very debatable whether we should have left. But if we did decide to leave, it was important that we do it correctly. And there were so many ways that it could have been done better. I mean, it's just absurd to claim that it wouldn't have been better. I mean, we could have evacuated. We had control of Afghanistan. We could have evacuated all our allies first, for example, and then the military could have pulled out. I mean, obviously that would have been the smart thing to do. Obviously, Biden was trying to meet some 9/11 deadline for political reasons, or otherwise was just careless as hell. And so there's no doubt that emboldened Biden, and the anger that our allies had against what Biden had done was another reason for Putin to be optimistic that our alliances wouldn't be as strong or hold together the way they have. But anyway, I want to move on from that and talk about these positions. So a lot of the people that I've named, like Crystal and Sagar at Breaking Points, and some of the people at Rising, Joe Rogan and others, who have been very critical of this war, I don't think they really understand the ramifications of the war. They seem to take a position that our government is more at fault than they actually are. And I acknowledge that our government at times forgets, the moral high ground. And I can give you lots of examples of that, but I won't do that here. But the point is that we could have had clearer messaging ahead of time that maybe would have deterred Putin. We could have more vigorously tried to engage with Russia, not in the kind of way that Bush and others have in the past, where I looked into his heart and saw a man I could trust or something like that. None of that nonsense. But we could have been much more aggressive diplomatically. We seem to get into one conflict and then we focus on it so closely that we don't give the proper attention to other conflicts. So when we're in the Middle East, we took our eye off of Russia and China. And there's a lot of complications there that I could go into in detail, but I'm not going to today. Anyway, this notion that it's the United States' fault that Putin went into Ukraine and invaded it, it's just false. I'll tell you, I think I've listened to so many people with so many different perspectives on the causes of this war, and I think it's very clear that the reason that Putin went into Ukraine is because the notion of a independent, democratic, and prosperous Ukraine on Russia's border was something that was just unfathomable for Putin. He just couldn't stand the idea, because it would, Russians would be looking over the fence and looking at this progress, the political freedoms, and the democratic rights of the Ukrainians, and it would encourage them to want those same rights. It is true that Russia and Ukraine have been very close. The people are very close in terms of their history, relationship, proximity, so on and so forth. So, in a lot of ways, Ukrainians, in a certain sense, were kind of like brothers to Russians. Like, I think most Ukrainians speak Russian, to some degree at least. And so Ukraine's move toward the West is very threatening to Putin. And that's his number one reason. His number one reason is to stay in power, personally. That's his number one reason for invading Ukraine, and because he can't tolerate a democratic Ukraine on his border. Now, I'm sure that Putin has legitimately convinced himself that he's also serving the interests of a mythical Russia that he's constructed primarily to support his personal ambitions and his invasion, and that he can make all kinds of claims about how his security was threatened and so forth by NATO. But in fact, let's be honest, NATO was no threat directly to Russia. It is a threat. Freedom is a threat to Russia. So having a free country on its border is a threat. But NATO never would have invaded or attempted to invade Russia. And there could have been negotiations about like keeping short-range nuclear weapons away from the, a certain distance away from Russia, keeping them out of Ukraine, keeping certain weapon systems out of Ukraine. But Putin refused to have those discussions. So this notion that that we're to blame is just false. Another point I want to make about the money that we're spending in Ukraine, and how, the other argument is that that money should be going to Americans. Well, there's a lot of money that probably should be going to help Americans that's wasted by our government, and I could go into that in detail of both parties wasting trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars were blown during the pandemic, which a lot of my friends who I watch every day on these other programs seem to be fine with handing out money to people as if it were free. This idea that we can just print millions of dollars and just give it away to people. I mean, we could spend our money better, but anyway, back to the point. The fact that the idea that our money that should be going to help people in America is going to Ukraine it's a bad argument, because I think that the money that we're spending now in Ukraine could literally save us trillions of dollars in dissuading a future war with Russia or China. Russia is becoming very weak on account of this war, not only economically, and I acknowledge that the sanctions haven't worked nearly as well as they should have, and that Russia's managing to stay afloat economically, but they are still weakening. They're much weaker. They've lost as much as 750,000 of some of their brightest young men and women who have fled the country because of this war. A lot of those people are tech people and intellectuals. Russia has expended a lot of their military stocks, which were much worse than Putin thought they were, because of corruption and bribery and graft. A lot of the money that should have gone to weapon systems and maintenance and all that went to corruption, probably went into the bank accounts of their generals and their colonels and so forth. So Russia's very weak. If we had a conventional war with Russia, we would probably win it very quickly. Not that we want one. We don't want a war with Russia or China, but we would probably win it very quickly because they're so weak militarily, and they've also expended so much in this war that they're low. Yes, our stocks are going low too, and that's a real concern, but that's an issue for another day. The other factor is that, again, China, who's been threatening to invade Taiwan for a long time, and still is, they have to be looking at this situation and looking at the way that the Europeans and the Americans have united, and all the failures that I've talked about that Putin made that to his disadvantage are also a disadvantage to China. China is very dependent on the West for feeding their citizens and for a lot of high-tech products that they don't have the ability yet to make themselves. They have to export food and energy. They're not like the United States, which doesn't need to import energy or food to survive. China must. So it would be very costly for Xi to invade Taiwan, and that cost just went way up. And so the billions that we're spending now could save us trillions in the future. Those are a couple of the main arguments that I'm going to make about Ukraine right now. And if anybody wants to leave any comments, I'll be happy to address any issues that anybody wants me to further. I know that nobody knows me, and so you don't know what I know or who I am or what I will argue, but I hope that you will come back and listen to me and argue with me, argue against me, hear what I have to say, see if you think it's interesting. If you do, continue to watch. like it, share it. If you don't think it's interesting, fine, don't listen. There's lots of other people you can listen to. But I think it's very important that we listen to people with different perspectives. I think a lot of the problem today, as we saw in certain issues like the Twitter files and censorship and so on, is that people aren't even willing to engage each other. And that's one of the reasons why I watch Breaking Points. I watch Rising. I like these shows. It's why I listen to people like Joe Rogan. And my favorite podcaster, Lex Fridman, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Fridman or Friedman. I watch these people because I want to hear arguments that agree with me. I want to hear arguments that disagree with me. I can't get smarter unless people challenge me and if people present opinions that make me think, that differ from my own. So that's what I want to encourage. That's one of the reasons for this channel, Beyond Partisanship. My motto is ideology is a cage for the mind. And I'd be happy to explain that at a further point. But I'm getting ready to sign off. So I want to thank you for any of you who have came around today to listen. And again, if you like the direction I'm going, hang with me and give me a chance and come back. And I'm trying to post at least once a week. I mean, honestly, I've conflicted about this. Part of me just frankly wants to shut everything off, play my guitar, enjoy my pets and other things and people in my life, and not even address these issues because frankly, I'm depressed about the state of America right now. The state of academia, of censorship, that people aren't debating or discussing issues enough, and people in many cases are frightened to speak about their own opinions and to stand up for what they believe in. There's just so much bullshit going on. So anyway, that's my purpose. And again, the people that I criticize today and their points of view, I also have learned from all these people and I respect them. And I'm fans of these people. So I think that's what's important. I'll tell you one thing that I can't stand is when you go, like if I go watch, or I go like live feed or the comment section of YouTube for like Breaking Points or Rising, or another person is what's her name from Idaho, used to be with Rising. Apologize, can't think of it right now. But anyway, or her channel, and where people just, oh, thank you, thank you for finally speaking the truth. At least somebody in this country is speaking the truth. My message to people: to stop believing people. Stop believing all these people I mentioned. Stop believing me. Challenge those people. Challenge Crystal and Sager. Challenge me. Don't cheerlead us. Don't cheerlead people you agree with. Be more thoughtful. Kim Iverson's the person I'm thinking of lately. She's promoted some positions that I think are very favorable to Russia. And I don't like where these people accuse people of being traitors or Putin apologists when they promote views that might sound favorable to Russia. Because usually there's more nuance there, and it might be their legitimate beliefs or feelings. But like when I read some of the comments on her channel, and people say things like, thank you for finally speaking the truth, as if all of it's true. Like our government is 100% bad. Putin's not such a bad guy. We should believe the Russians about the drone incident recently, where they dumped fuel on our drone and damaged it, and then it went into the sea. We should believe the Russians, but not believe the Americans. First of all, we don't know the truth immediately after an event. We need time to sort that out. And secondly, it's kind of foolish to trust the Russians over us. I mean, that's kind of insane. Yes, our country has made serious mistakes in the past. Yes, we need to watch our country and we need to keep an eye on it. That's why I watch people like Kim Iverson. I appreciate that she's a watchdog, that she's holding our government to task. I like her. I think she's doing a good job. On that issue and other issues, I disagree strongly with her. I think she's often too friendly toward China and Russia. And to me, that speaks to the fact that she doesn't really understand China or Russia enough. These are really bad, evil regimes, and I don't use that term casually. I think you only need to look at, for China, for example, you need only look at what's happened to the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, the surveillance state. That's scary as hell. The lockdowns for COVID. You think they're bad in the United States? In China, they literally shut people's door, nailed people's doors shut and kept them inside. People were escaping out windows just to go get food. The totalitarianism is not cute or funny or acceptable. And the idea that other people, Chinese people don't care about freedom and personal rights, Russians don't care, nonsense. All humans care to some extent about their personal freedom, their ability to express themselves, and so forth. People get confused through propaganda and stuff like that, but these are universal traits, and they're not traits of a Western culture. These are universal. There are definitely differences globally and in different societies about the nature of their particular democracy or their particular aspirations as political creatures. But the desire to have some political autonomy and freedoms in the world is universal. So, and I need not even address what Putin has done, but the notion that these countries who lie to their own people all the time, I mean, we at least have a free press that can take our government to task. They don't. So the notion that they're on an equal footing with us morally or in terms of information, in terms of honesty or truth, no, they're not even close. And it's foolish to give so much trust to Russian sources and Chinese sources that are sympathetic to Putin or Xi Jinping. So, yes, our country lies, our politicians lie, a lot of times they're not held accountable for their actions, and that's our job. We need to do that by participating in our democracy, and that's what I'm hoping that we will do. So thank you very much, and again, if you like this video, I'd like you to like it and promote it, otherwise other people won't see it. If nobody wants to see it, that's fine, I'll quit, but I would like to get a robust conversation going to help. I think that's the best way to hold up and spread democracy is to get involved. And it doesn't mean that you have to be an activist or you have to be an election worker or something like that. In fact, a lot of activists tend to be on the extremes of politics, but you should be out discussing issues or at least listening to different points of views. So anyway, thank you again. This is Beyond Partisanship. My name is Peter VanValkenburgh. Take care.